Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News Canada. Today is Monday, October 27th, 2025. We're going to be looking at the current polling of the Liberal government that won election just this past May. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics informations. To power reviews and news, subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, be sure to follow the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X, as well as our website, linked to the description below for news feeds and our latest predictions. Election Time News, there's never a dull moment in politics. So, what we have is that basically the next election is going to be happening on or before October 15th, 2029 by law. And so what we saw for the 2025 election, which is basically where we're going to be starting things off, is that there was a large comeback of the Liberal Party after it looked like they were going to lose a large amount of seats, basically completely blown out at that point. And so they basically had a strong comeback, especially after the beginning of the calendar year. There was a lot of influence with, first off, the fact that Trudeau stepped down, as well as the fact that there was a lot of aggression by Donald Trump from the United States, who had had their election as just a few months prior, 5 months, I believe, before April 6th, 6 months. And so that did definitely help them be able to pick up a few more competitive seats. They were potentially going out for a huge blowout, losing a lot of seats across the country. And so what they ended up with was that they were going for a conservative majority government. There was a lot of potential losses across the board, even to the NDP, who has completely collapsed since then as well. They even lost party status. As you can see, they only got 7 seats. Right here, they only narrowly held on to Nunavut, as well as some seats over here, Carney, as well as some deeper city regions in. Jeez, this scrolling is abominable. Some small city regions here. Basically, just Nunavut, though, as well as some, interestingly enough, in Edmonton. They managed to hold on to that seat still. 2 in Vancouver, 1 in Winnipeg. But that's basically completely it. They really won in Montreal, but they lost a lot of ground to the Liberals, which is actually how the Liberals ended up being able to just narrowly miss out on a majority government. They were very, very close. They currently, as of right now, would need 3 more seats for a majority, 172 necessary, and they were very close to being able to get that. On election, and it was looking like they would make a narrow majority, and then they really didn't do that well in the western part of the country. So, Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, those results didn't really come in very strongly for them. So, what ended up being was very impressive compared to what we had been seeing for a strong for a long time for that. I mean, if you look at this spike right here, is insane. They were almost third place. In some polls, they were third place to the NDP, and the Conservatives were a strong first. As a matter of fact, they would have had a strong majority. They almost got a majority of the vote here. It was about 45% for the polling average here. Collapsed. The Liberals ended up taking the lead in the last 3 months. That's right around when that is basically both the same day. They happened, I believe, 2 days apart. Was Justin Trudeau stepped down, and the following day, Donald Trump entered office. So that did absolutely help things. Here's the total composition. I don't know why the Liberals aren't on their own, since they almost have a majority. It would show that it'd go almost right down the middle. But 43.91% of the popular vote here. Very strong performance in the end. They did get 342 candidates there, and of course, obviously not all of them won, but 169 seats won, up 17, which is definitely, again, a huge improvement for where they were expected to go even just a few months right into the campaign. But then Carney was able to take that very poor looking direction for them and turn things around. Basically, all the minor parties are completely in free fall. The bloc lost 11 seats. The NDP basically just completely fell apart and they lost partisan status for the first time since 1993. And the Greens basically are completely gone. Pignalt lost, and so the only one left is Elizabeth May in Saanich Gulf Islands, who is over here in Victoria. So that's definitely, so it's kind of going towards a two-party system, sort of how we saw in Australia, but definitely a lot more extreme on this level. And so this was quite a considerable strong party's victory came after a substantial rebound. The polls notice being one of the widest on record in any democracy. So that is the huge thing to note right there. Was it was a very unexpected comeback that came very, very quickly. And so it just does show that generally, even though in some areas things are still relatively polarized, elections can be somewhat volatile in a lot of ways. So what we're looking at next is going to be the general poll trend line from 338. So 338 is basically the 538 for Canada. Of course, 538's gone now, but they do say yes, you do know it's 343 now, but they've been around for a little while, and so they have their projection trend line here. They had daily updates until the election. Now it's every week. And so what we're looking at is a plus or minus 4%, 42 to 40. So that's roughly where it was on the election, but you can see that it had gone up. So this was the honeymoon period for the Liberals. Typically right after you take government, you end up with a strong period there. It's been relatively consistent for the past month and a half, but there was a strong honeymoon period here. The gap was about 7% at its highest. That's actually 8. And then it started to drop. NDP has actually been slowly gaining. They actually collapsed after the election completely. They've started to gain ground again. The bloc has dropped a little bit, but that's probably where most of the support came from. The Conservatives dropped a good bit, but now they're coming back as well. PPC has basically not gained any ground here. What we're looking at is, right around 2%, 1% or so, plus or minus 0. So basically, it's going to be like half a point to 2 points or so. But really, the number one thing to focus on is the Liberals have generally been gaining ground, but then they've lost it again. So not necessarily that they are losing ground from where they were in the election, but it's really important to note that they had a strong gain here, but then they have since lost it. And interestingly enough, where we actually had every single poll going for the Liberals here, going all the way through until August. Then we had Battle River Crowfoot when Pierre Poilievre actually held the seat for the CPC and actually managed to get back in. The first poll after that was Conservatives by 2. So, interestingly, every single one that's had the Conservatives ahead, except for this one by Angus Reid, or 2 by Angus Reid. Only Abacus Data and Angus Reid have had the Conservatives up. Nanos Research and Laguerre of Nanos Research, those two are the ones that have, and Ipsos all have the Liberals up. Major by a lot on this one, plus 9.8 for Nanos Research. But it has been declining a slight amount, 4.1 for the more recent one. Legere down to plus 6. Nanos Research 2.7 for that final lead right there, 39.3 to 36.6. And so obviously that's a slight trend that's to be expected here. If we look specifically by state, the federal projections for 338, what we're potentially seeing is Ontario's actually tightening up a good bit, 67 to 54. Manitoba, I believe, was narrowly... yeah, that looks like 7 to 6 to 1. So that's not changed. Saskatchewan, 13 to 3. 13 to 1. My apologies, I can't. Yeah, that's the exact same. So I mean, Alberta down to 2 for the Liberals. That's actually the exact same plus 1. So not much has changed as far as Western Canada goes, but southern area where most of the population centers are, centered around in general outer Toronto, the suburbs down here, a little bit into Windsor as well, right across from Detroit. You get into the southern stretch here. You can also potentially see some breaking in on the less very dense urban regions in Ontario. That's really what we're looking at as far as that goes. But it goes 44-32. It's the latest federal poll that they have. That's not actually shown here. Oh, there it is, all the way down there, 42-34. September. So it doesn't look like they actually have their October one. They might be a bit behind, but Pala's data is not on here either. So maybe behind a few days. I think the last one they do have is Nanos Research. Yep. So this is the most recent one that Wikipedia has. So it's not 100% always up to date, but Abacus C+1. And so projections updated every Sunday, so that means that it just happened yesterday. And so looking at 169 seats, that is literally exactly where they are right now. That's actually continuing to gain a bit, interestingly enough. 139, that's a drop. That's actually less than they have right now currently. The beneficiary of that is going to be the Bloc, interestingly enough. 7 and 1 for the Green, 2 for the Greens, actually. The Greens projected to gain 1, most likely going to be in Kitchener Center, which is basically where they were potentially competitive. That was expected to potentially go to them there, but the Conservatives narrowly picked it off in the election. That was one of the ones that really helped the Conservatives be stronger in their overall showing, and that's why there's currently a hung parliament. And so the Bloc at 26, that's actually quite a bit stronger. We're definitely going to have to see how things go in the Quebec provincial elections, see how that ends up turning out. In order to be able to see how well the Bloc can be able to do in the future. They generally do a lot better on the provincial level. They haven't seen that same collapse that they have somewhat federally, where now the Liberals are by far the strongest party there. Provincial projections, obviously strong for the Bloc, but New Brunswick, not necessarily that unexpected. Saskatchewan, not necessarily unexpected either. British Columbia, the NDP being pretty strong. That's probably going to be quite a bit of split vote, though, here. It's going to be first past the post losses there for the NDP, most likely. These are provincial elections, though, so basically there's not going to be much left until the federal election, which could be called at any point, of course, until no later than October 15th, 2029. Can take quite a while, but in the meantime, it's looking like that the Liberals are doing okay, and even this far out, which, still quite a bit that could happen. I mean, again, basically everything happened all in just a few weeks, but that is basically what we have, what we're going to be looking at, is especially they gained doubly from the Conservatives and the NDP, and the NDP ended up completely collapsing at the end. So that's going to be the main takeaway here. So the Liberals were doing phenomenally. Now they're starting to lose track of where they were at their highest in the honeymoon period, but they still have not really lost anything from where they were at the beginning of the cycle. So they are looking on track to be able to maintain things right now, as long as they don't shake things up too much. If there is a no confidence vote called, which hasn't happened in quite a while, but absolutely is not impossible, then that could make things a bit interesting, starting a new election season, and so that would be quite an interesting thing to have right around now. But as of right now, there's, in theory, basically just a hung parliament. It's kind of working things along, but that'll all have to be wait and see. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already, and thank you again, and have a fantastic rest of your day.